Good morning. Good morning. I am Meagan Pitluck-Schmitt, a member of the board here at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Reston. And whether you are on Zoom or here in the sanctuary, we are so glad you are with us. No matter how old or how young you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, however you identify and whomever you love, know that you are welcome here. This morning, Cynthia Young is on professional leave, and even though she's not here with us, she did plan the music for today's service. Leeanne Jackson is serving as our hymn leader today. Our religious education director, Linda Weaver, is also not with us this morning, but she did assist with planning for today's service. I am now going to briefly invite Stewardship Chair Co-Chair Nonnie Mullin to the pulpit to share a stewardship update.
Good morning, everyone. So I am excited to announce that, to just give you an update, we are at 67% towards our goal, and we've had 76 pledges total, and the total raised is $259,420. Yeah, so thank you everyone for your generosity this far. And I just want to remind everyone, we mailed out ones. If we didn't see you in the sanctuary, we mailed them out to you. So our Zoom folks, you should get yours soon too. So check your mailbox. And we're going to start following up via email next. And so if you get an email, it just means you hadn't pledged yet. I know some people had some concern or were slightly confused about the pledge form. So just a heads up. And we thank you so much.
Keep those pledge cards coming. All right. Okay, I have 4 additional announcements. Please join us next Sunday for a special Easter service. The service will be interactive and intergenerational. The choir will sing a piece composed by UUCR member Alan Kramer, and we will be joined by a guest conductor, Dr. Mary Hannah Klontz, director of the Nova Community Chorus. Please note that registration is open for the Article 2 workshop and space is limited. The recent Article 2 workshop series in February was very well received. Because we were not able to accommodate all who were interested at that time, we have scheduled an additional workshop series which will take place in April on Zoom. Registration is open to members and friends. Space is limited and we anticipate the workshop will fill to capacity quickly, so get your registration in if you're interested. If you have questions about stewardship, please join the stewardship co-chairs Maggie, Mack, and Nonnie Mullin for a stewardship Q&A session after church today from 11:15 to 11:45 a.m. Grab your coffee and come join the session, which will take place in the boardroom. All are welcome. And lastly, we will be collecting non-perishable and unexpired food for Cornerstones on Easter morning and after the service. After the service, we will be holding an egg hunt. We hope to see you then. And now, let us center ourselves for worship. Please take some deep, quieting breaths with me. Let us enter our time of worship together as we enjoy this morning's prelude.
Good morning. I am Reverend Aileen Fitzke, and it is my honor to serve this congregation as its minister. Our opening words are by Jessica Rodella. Listen. Listen to silence. Listen to the wind. Listen to the stars. Hear trees. Dance. Dance to the beat of your neighbor's heart. Dance to the rhythm of your childhood dreams. Sing. Sing and hum a wordless song to the tune of your rushing blood. And pray. Pray with a fever that makes you sweat through February snow. Pray with a fervor that gives you chills in July. Shout your prayer like a howl. Howl till the sound of your soul touches clouds and haunts the moon. Come, let us howl our hallelujahs. Come, let us pray and sing and celebrate. Come, let us worship together.
Our opening hymn this morning is number 38, Morning Has Broken. It's in your gray hymnal. The music arrangement we're using is a little bit different. If you guys are familiar with the Cat Stevens version, you may find that helpful. So please rise in body or spirit as we sing together.
Today's chalice lighting words come to us from Laura Yvonne Steinman. Let us listen deeply to what is on our hearts. Let us listen to what our fears are. Let us listen to the young children. Let us listen to the teens. Let us listen to the elders. Let us listen when the world is sick. Let us listen.
Here at UUCR, we have a beloved tradition of singing our covenant together every Sunday. Love is the spirit of this church. We'll remain seated as we sing together. The words will be up on the screen and are on your order of service. If today is your first time visiting here, please accept this song as our blessing to you.
It's now the time in our service for our time for all ages, so I invite all those young and young at heart to come up here in the front as I tell you a story. And thank you to Linda, who did the slides for me, because she knows better than I how to do that. So all I have to do is read. Come on up. Yeah, I'm going to read the story. The story is The Rabbit Listened by Corey Dorfeld. One day, Taylor decided to build something. Something new, something special. There we go. Something amazing. Taylor was so proud. But then, out of nowhere, things came crashing down. The chicken was the first to notice. Cluck, cluck, what a shame. I'm so sorry this happened. Let's talk, talk. Cluck, cluck. But Taylor didn't feel like talking, so the chicken left. Next came the bear. Grrr, how horrible. I bet you feel so angry. Let's shout about it. Grrr, grrr. But Taylor didn't feel like shouting, so the bear left. The elephant knew just what to do. Trump-ta! I can fix this. We just need to remember exactly the way things were. But Taylor didn't feel like remembering, so the elephant left. One by one, they came. The hyena, let's laugh about it. The ostrich, gulp. Let's hide and pretend nothing happened. The kangaroo, tisk, tisk. What a mess, let's throw it all away. And the snake, shh, let's knock down someone else's. But Taylor didn't feel like doing anything with anybody, so eventually they all left, until Taylor was alone. In the quiet, Taylor didn't even notice the rabbit, but it moved closer and closer until Taylor could feel its warm body. Together they sat in silence until Taylor said, "Please stay with me." The rabbit listened. The rabbit listened as Taylor talked. The rabbit listened as Taylor shouted. The rabbit listened as Taylor remembered, and laughed. The rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to hide, to throw everything away, to ruin things for someone else. Through it all, the rabbit never left. And when the time was right, the rabbit listened to Taylor's plan to build again. "I can't wait," Taylor said. "It's going to be amazing." Thank you all. So this morning there's not formal RE, but there will be activities for the children and childcare downstairs. So now we can sing our young ones out. One in prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love that so faithfully animates our creation, we are grateful for this community that is with us in times of both joy and sorrow. We hold in our hearts this morning all those who are facing any hardship or difficulty, those who are grieving or facing illness or disability in themselves or their loved ones. In particular, this morning, we hold in our hearts and prayers the people killed in the massacre in Moscow on Friday night, and for all people suffering because of war and violence. For them, we light this candle. Now, let us take a moment of silence.
As a self-funded church, UCR relies on the generosity of its members and friends to fund daily operations and to ensure that the church and its resources are here for us and others now and in the future. Pledges support our worship and music programs, our religious education program, programs for members and friends, community outreach, and connections to Unitarian Universalism. We now invite you to support the work of UU Reston by making your donation in the collection plate if you are here in the sanctuary, or at the link on the slide and in the chat box if you're on Zoom. Thank you for your generosity and support of our beloved spiritual home.
That beautiful piece of music was written by our own Alan Kramer. On August 29th, 1952, composer John Cage premiered his new piece of music, 4 minutes and 33 seconds, to an audience in Woodstock, New York. The venue was an open-air concert hall. It was performed by the world-renowned pianist David Tudor. It was performed in 3 movements. The first 30 seconds, the second 2 minutes and 23 seconds, and the third movement 1 minute and 40 seconds. In front of David Tudor were 6 pages of completely blank sheets of paper that were the score of the piece. For those of you familiar with the piece, you know that 4 minutes and 33 seconds was in silence, punctuated by David Tudor either opening or closing the lid of the keyboard. At the beginning of each movement, he would close the lid of the keys, set a timer, and then rest his hand on the lid. At the end of each movement, he would open and close the lid. 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. But was it really silence? It was no accident that Cage had chosen the open-air concert hall in the summer. Inspired by his recent encounter with Zen Buddhism, among other things, he wanted the audience to experience the sounds of what Ram Dass called being here now. The sounds of the summer night was the music. Both those of whatever creatures could be heard, crickets, frogs, the wind in the trees, even the sounds of the humans including sounds of people scraping their chairs back and leaving the hall in frustration. It was about learning how to listen in the moment. He set up the musical expectations in a classical concert hall and all that represented, and then disrupted the expectations. Cage was one of the inspirations for Paulina Oliveros, composer and musician, and the founder of the Center for Deep Listening. Deep listening, wrote Oliveros, is a lifelong practice. The more I listen, the more I learn how to listen. Deep listening involves going below the surface of what is heard, expanding to the whole field of sound while finding focus. This is the way to connect with the acoustic environment, all that inhabits it and all that there is. She differentiates between hearing and listening. To hear is the physical means that enables perception. To listen is to give attention to what is perceived, both acoustically and psychologically. Listening is the constant interplay with the moment, compared with remembered experiences. So listening is subject to time delays. Sometimes what is heard is interpreted anywhere from milliseconds to many years to never. How often do we hear things in everyday life, every single day, but until someone points it out to us, we don't know what the sound is? We are surrounded by animal sounds, bird sounds, frog sounds, but until someone says, that's a robin, or that's a peeper, a small spring frog, or an owl or mourning dove, whose vocalizations are actually very similar. They just remain sounds. We don't know how to interpret them. Deep listening is a profound practice, one probably few of us really engage in, especially now. We rarely give ourselves a chance to really listen. Even when we are outside in nature walking, we are often connected to our devices, listening to podcasts, music, audiobooks, not really being present to the sounds all around us, not being able to even tell ourselves what animals, insects, and other natural sounds we are surrounded by every day. So, I'm giving you a sound, and I'm going to ask you. Can anyone tell me what that is? Frogs. Very good. Do you know what kind of frog? Tree frog. Thank you. Yes, it's a gray tree frog. Thank you to Matt Medler from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology who provided that sound for me. Because that tree frog sings all summer, all through June and July. So now that you know what it is, you'll hear it. Even in our everyday encounters with other people, we do not really listen. Because in our culture, we are not taught to listen. We're taught to talk. Writes Kate Murphy in her book, You're Not Listening. Listening is the neglected stepchild of communications research, pushed aside by investigations into effective elocution, rhetoric, argumentation, persuasion, and propaganda. Browse the 3 volumes, 2,048 pages of the International Encyclopedia of Interpersonal Communication, and you'll find 1 entry on listening. And you won't find any entries on listening in the index of the Sage Handbook of Interpersonal Communication. I took a class in February called Peace Building Amid Polarization, a leader's toolkit for constructive engagement on the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. In the class, one of the first things they taught us was how to listen to another person. Not to judge or respond, but to listen and reflect back to them what we thought we heard them say. Granted, many people taking the class had practiced this kind of reflective listening before. So when we got in our small groups, it was very easy to see who knew how to do it, those who struggled with it, and those who did not quite understand why we were doing it. But it was stated clearly in our learning objectives for the class. We were there to develop empathy, emotional, spiritual intelligence, and wisdom is vital as we center ourselves and accompany people through suffering, fear, anger, and grief. Empathic presence allows us to address personal and collective trauma, to help people move away from hard-heartedness and bitterness, and to develop cognitive and effective tools for self-awareness and compassion, even and especially in the midst of trying circumstances. Listening, real, deep listening, facilitates this objective. And most of us, we don't need to listen to navigate world conflicts and the difficulties of conflicting narratives about global history. Most of us are not going to be asked to do that. But we all will be asked, to listen to our spouse, or our child, or a friend or fellow congregant. And sometimes we will not agree, either about what we are talking about or what we need from the conversation. So often we talk around each other. In the book Super Communicators, Charles Duhigg talks about 3 typical kinds of conversations. And each asks a different kind of question. What is this really about? This is a problem-solving conversation. How do we feel? This is an emotional support conversation. Who are we? This is a social conversation. The social conversations are those we all engage in, talking to friends, catching up, about ourselves and others we know. The problem-solving conversations are those in which we might be seeking advice. And the emotional conversations are those in which we just want someone else to listen to us, to vent, and we are not necessarily seeking solutions. The problem arises in communication when we are not totally aware of the type of conversations we are in the midst of. One person may think they are supposed to be giving advice when the other person simply wants to be listened to. Or one person might think they are simply listening to the latest update in a friend group when really the other person is trying to ask how to navigate a particular conflict. We talk around each other without truly understanding what the other person needs. And many times, this is because we're not really listening. So intent are we on offering advice or opinion, offering witty repartee, or trying to steer the conversation in a different direction. And we fail to listen, not attending to the verbal or bodily clues that tell us what the other person really wants or needs. And when we do sink our understanding of the types of conversation we are engaged in, our brains become one. Researchers have discovered that when people start truly communicating, that is, really listening to and understanding each other, their brain waves start to synchronize. Henry David Thoreau once wrote, "The greatest compliment that was ever paid me was when one asked me what I thought and then attended to my answer." And while our devices give us enormous amount of value as far as information and certain kinds of communication, they can prevent us from having meaningful exchanges in which listening is the key. Writes Kate Murphy in You're Not Listening, "Technology does not so much interfere with listening as make it seem unnecessary. Our devices indulge our fear of intimacy by fooling us into thinking we are socially connected even when we are achingly alone. We avoid the messiness and imperfections of others, retreating into the relative safety of our devices. The result is a loss of richness and nuance in our social interactions." Deep listening isn't always easy, but there are some things that we can do to improve our listening skills. Some may seem obvious and others not so much. The first is to remove distractions when you're having a serious or even not so serious conversation. For example, put away all devices. The second is to suspend judgment. When I was taking the class on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there was a lot of different opinions being interjected into the chat. There were over 100 people taking the class. As the class proceeded, so much so that during the class, during one class, the chat became so distracting that for the final several classes, the facilitator shut it off. People had stopped listening and just started judging whoever was speaking. The facilitators did not discourage judgment or questioning, but asked the group to email them after the class, and then the facilitators would address them during the beginning of the next class. Another thing we can do is to ask questions and practice humility and curiosity. Asking questions allows our conversation partners to go deeper and share more about themselves. Actively practice not making the conversation about you. Another thing that you can do is allow for silence and time for reflective thought. For some reason, we are trained not to allow for gaps in conversation. Someone always jumps in to fill the void. And finally, pay attention to body language. Note what the other person is not saying, what lies behind the words, by the way they position their bodies. And also note how you are positioning your own body during conversation. Are you nodding or acknowledging the other person in some way? Kate Murphy writes, listening is often regarded as talking's meek counterpart, but it is actually the more powerful position in communication. You learn when you listen. It's how you divine truth and detect deception. And though listening requires that you let the other person have their say, it doesn't mean you remain silent forever. In fact, how one responds is the measure of a good listener, and arguably the measure of a good person. We can learn to be better listeners. We can learn to listen more deeply, both to the world around us and specifically to the people around us. And in doing so, we can become better people, better communicators, and ultimately transform relationships, communities, and maybe even the world. Amen, and blessed be.
Our closing hymn this morning is number 90 in your gray hymnal, From All the Fret and Fever of the Day. Please rise in body or spirit, and we will sing together.
Our benediction this morning is by Gary Kowalski. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all. Maybe it means just listening. Unplugging the TV, turning off the computer, quieting the mental chatter and distractions. Maybe it means listening to the birds and the insects and the wind in the leaves, the creaking and groaning of trees, noticing who else is out there, not far away, but nearby, sitting so still we can hear our heartbeat. Watch our breath, the gentle whoosh of air, the funny noises from our own insides, marveling at the body we take so much for granted. Maybe it means listening to our dreams, paying more attention to what we really want from life, and less attention to all the nagging, scolding voices from our past. Or maybe it's all about listening to each other, not thinking ahead to how we can answer or rebut or parry or advise or admonish, but actually being present to each other. Perhaps if we just sit quietly, we'll overhear a peace whispering through the centuries that's missing from the clamor of the moment. Maybe prayer means listening to the silences between the words, noticing the negativity of space, the vast, undifferentiated, and nameless wonder that underlies it all. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all, but listening with the heart to the angel choirs all around us. To those who have ears, let them listen.
We now extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.